Hello to all my Bi-Conics Wrestling Podcast fans out there, and welcome to another Beat the Clock TV review for this week's Arena of Honor for June 22nd, 2023. As you can see, I am rocking it solo this week. JVL, who is my normal co-host for Ring of Honor, is currently in Chicago for a wedding. So, good luck to him, and I hope he's having a good time, and I'm going to be holding it down this week for Ring of Honor. Before I jump into the review properly, make sure to give us a follow across all the social medias at BC WrestlePod on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel here, the Bi-Conics Wrestling Podcast. I'm going to be honest, this week's Ring of Honor was a lot. It was 13 matches, almost a 2-hour episode, and it was a lot in one sitting. It was still a lot of fun. I'm slowly starting to see that Ring of Honor is starting to be more of its independent brand, where it is starting to develop storylines between teams. Backstage segments actually play a part from the week to week. I will get into the good, and I will also get into the it's alright. I don't think anything inherently was bad this week, but there's a lot of things that still could be worked on. But because now we're slowly getting into Ring of Honor being an independent thing, think we're going to eventually get there. So let's begin. The first match that we had on Ring of Honor this week was an 8-man tag between Serpentico, Kip Sabian, and the Butcher and the Blade, taking on Commander El Hijo and the Lucha Bros. Essentially, this was a glorified squash match, but when you have the 4 luchadors just be doing all kinds of stuff and flipping and jumping off things, just being luchador shit, as we like to call it here at the Bi-Conics. Honestly, it was still a lot of fun to watch. The Butcher, the Blade, Kip Sabian, and Serpentico did manage to get some offense in, and it was a nice back and forth, but ultimately, the winners here are the Lucha Bros, El Hijo de Vikingo, and Commander. Like I mentioned before, not much of more than a squash match, but anytime you get these 4 of the Lucha Squad, as I like to call them, it's always fun to watch. It's a great time, and honestly, it was a hot start to Ring of Honor this week. Before I get into the next match, it should be noted that it was announced that from moving forward, Ring of Honor tapings will always happen before Collision, which makes sense because Ring of Honor will happen for a bit, and then Collision is only about a 2-hour show, so it makes sense. Whereas Dynamite always will be having the Rampage taping, so you have 3 hours of wrestling. And if you go to Collision, you might get 3 to 4 hours, depending on how many Ring of Honor matches that they tape. Match number 2 for this week is going to be Gringo Loco versus Willie Mack. We begin this match with Mac running in the boot, and both men start to trade leapfrogs. Mac cartwheels out of the head scissors, which Gringo Loco does the same. Basically, these two are mirror images of each other. We then start to ramp up with a huge DT by Mac, which sends Loco back into the corner. Mac tries for a charging pump kick, and then an imploding cannonball into the corner. Mac goes for the 2 count. There is a big Samoa drop from Mac before a kip up into a standing moonsault that also gets another 2 count. Loco gets set up on the top turnbuckle as Mac tries to follow. Loco shoves him off and hits a springboard moonsault. Mac rolls to the outside and a flipping senton. Beautiful thing to see. By Loco takes Mac out. Once they're back in the ring, Loco does some quick strikes, but Mac follows it up with a rolling elbow. Then, as we get to the finishing sequence of this match, there's an Insiguri by Loco, but then there is a Shining Wizard that lands, and both men are down. Mac gets up, and Loco follows. Both guys are on the top, but Loco hits a Spanish fly to get the win in this match. I really enjoy watching Willie Mack and Loco. They are what you call heavy doors. That these two built more solid than most typical luchadors, but they have power and they still are able to do the athletics that you would see lucha libre. Overall, I do feel that this match was a little bit too short for my liking, but this was still a fun match, and it's all the stuff that you expect to see when it comes to these two. Match number 3, we see Trish Adora taking on Ring of Honor debut Allison. So this match begins with a test of strength, and then we immediately start to see Trish with a standing Kimura, but Allison drops her throat first on the top rope. There's a running avalanche in the corner and some mountain punches by Allison. We then get chops in the corner by Allison, but Trish ducks underneath and she returns the favor. We get a spinning neck breaker by Allison to get the 2 count, and then Allison gets into the face of Trish, but Trish hits a German suplex from the ground, which is something that I haven't seen all that often. It is so much fun to see. Allison then gets an arm wringer to the mat, where Trish then hammerlocks the arm and sends Allison shoulder first into the turnbuckle. The snap suplex with a bridge by Trish gets the 2 count. Trish calls for the lariat, but Allison ducks under and delivers a German suplex of her own and a pump kick for a near fall. Allison can't get the pile driver in time, and then Trish hits the lariat Tubman to connect out of nowhere for Trish to pick up the win in this particular match. I personally think that Allison Kay has a lot to bring to the table, but I'm not sure if Ring of Honor has harnessed it quite yet. So I'm hoping with more time, Ring of Honor will find a way to channel Allison's potential. But what I do know is that Trish continues to prove in Ring of Honor that she is a staple of the women's division. And I'm so excited to see how much more Ring of Honor will put her in this position, as she is on her way, in my opinion, to become a big player here in Ring of Honor's future. Match number 4 this week, we see Kyle Fletcher of Aussie Open and representing the United Empire take on the last real man, Silas Young. Have been loving Kyle Fletcher on the singles tear since his tag team partner Mark has been out with injury. This man's is just continuing to show that tag team or singles action, he's always on top of things. We start off this match where Kyle gets off a shoulder block and a running leg to send Silas to the floor. Then a plancha to the floor by Kyle to continue the assault. And then once we get them back in the ring, where Silas catches charging Fletcher with a stun gun, not an actual stun gun, but the move a stun gun. Silas then puts boots to Fletcher in the corner and looks for a vertical suplex, but gets countered by Kyle to get suplex instead. There are flying forearms by Kyle and a back suplex to get the 2 count. There's a running enziguri in the corner by Kyle for another 2 count. Kyle charges, but Silas sidesteps him, sending him into the apron. And then there is a double jump lariat in which Silas connects with it. A backbreaker and suplex combo by Silas for a 2 count. Silas goes to attempt a Pee-wee plunge, but it misses, and Kyle delivers a big super kick. And then Kyle shows off a new move in his arsenal we've seen before, which is a hammerlock driver in order to pick up the win over Silas Young. I thought this was a nice match here. Obviously, Kyle Fletcher definitely has that rocket strapped to him in singles action, and it helps when he's going up against a veteran such as Silas Young. We got a pretty decent match, which I really enjoyed. This next match, I'm not going to spend too much time on. Match number 5 this week sees the Embassy taking on Curtis, Trenton Storm, AJZ. All you need to know that this was a glorified squash match. The Embassy pretty much was in control the whole entire match, even when Luke, Trenton, and AJZ were going back and forth. Ultimately, the Embassy countered everything, and we ended the match with a sidewalk slam, which then gets into all 3 men hitting the triple drill claw, the pedigree, the Rikishi driver by the Embassy opposing team in order to pick up the victory. Not much to say. more of a squash match to continue to show the embassy as the powerhouse monsters that they are. My only concern is that we're not really seeing a storyline or any trios team be a credible threat to Embassy. I'm hoping that as we continue to make Ring of Honor, that we start to see multiple threats to the Embassy's six-man tag championships. And we'll see if this leads anything to Death Before Dishonor in a couple of weeks on July 21st. Match number 6 for this week, we see Josh Woods taking on Dalton Castle. I honestly think this was probably up to this point of the episode my favorite match, only because Josh Dalton have similar wrestling styles, they have similar physical build, and they ultimately are mirroring each other in a bit. I thought this was awesome with Woods taking on control of the match. Then shenanigans, as always happens, Dalton gains control, and it just is a nice back and forth. We do see multiple interferences from Mark Sterling and Tony Nese to help out Josh Woods, and then we see the boys getting involved as well to help out Dalton. Ultimately, the finishing sequence for this match, we see Woods getting sent to the outside by a clothesline, which Dalton uses Boy 1 as a projectile to hit Tony Nese, and then Boy 2 gets thrown into Nese as well. Woods tries to capitalize here, but Castle catches Woods' leapfrog right into a bangerang for the win, which means that your winner for this match is Dalton Castle. Again, this match was so much fun. It was entertaining. I think this is a good way to show how you use interferences in matches in order to the overall storytelling inside of the ring. And overall, this is a pretty entertaining competitive match. Again, both men have similar styles, and I thought this was an excellent match. I do wish that Josh Woods would have picked up the win here because him and Tony have been on a losing streak as of late in Ring of Honor. But it's all right, and ultimately you send the crowd home happy. Dalton Castle picking up the win as Dalton is a fan favorite in Ring of Honor. We then get 2 video vignettes, which kind of sets up match number 7. Video vignettes. The first one we see Stokely Hathaway trying to talk about why him being part of the management for Ring of Honor is important. In comes the Kingdom, which is Maria Ellis Bennett, Mike Bennett, and Matt Taven, who try to stir the pot a little bit, trying to get Stokely to give them a shot at the Ring of Honor Tag Team Championships, but then also stirring up some feelings in Stokely by saying that the infantry has been talking mad smack about him, that tried to gaslight him into getting the match. And then in proceeding the second video vignette, we see Stokely Hathaway talking with the infantry. The infantry says that's not true, but you know what? Give them the match against the Kingdom and then go and prove to them that we mean what we say. Kingdom is just this all talk and no fight. Which leads into match number 7, the Kingdom versus the Infantry. I can tell that the Infantry is still trying to get their grounds as a tag team, but I also think that their presentation is a lot of fun, and of course the Kingdom is really good. What I loved in this match in particular, outside of your moves and the things that they did, is that we had a secondary storyline going through that involves the 2 teams. Maria tried to get involved in this match, and she tried to be a distraction to help the Kingdom win this match. But Trish Adora comes out, and she isn't having any of it. And in fact, Maria at one point gets on the apron and tries to give Mike Bennett the chair, but Trish pulls Maria off the apron and runs her back, which distracts Mike and Taven enough for Captain Sean Dean to roll up Bennett for the win for the infantry. I'm going to be honest, I'm shocked that the infantry pulled up a win here and this big upset. But in hindsight, it makes sense that they win this match because they have lost to the Kingdom a lot recently, losing another match against them when it help. I'm excited to see infantry get their shine, and then it seems that we're building up feud between the Kingdom and the infantry, as well as Trish versus Maria, which I think is to be so much fun. Match number 8, we have a Ring of Honor debut of Lee Moriarty, Big Bill, taking on Matt Sydal and Blake Christian. I love seeing Lee Moriarty in his Taiga style fighting, mixing your ground base work, your luchador, high flying stuff. It is so much fun. Anytime you get Matt Sydal and Blake Christian in a match is always going to be fun. But the finishing sequence of this match, we see that Lee is set up in a double team power bomb. Christian pushes Bill into her Karana floor. Christian follows with a somersault 450, but Bill moves, and it is a choke slam on the apron. We get an East River crossing to Christian, and Bill gets the pin, with your winners being Lee Moriarty. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't sure how I felt when Big Bill together, but they're onto something here in my opinion. I think Big Bill hasn't been the most improved wrestler over the last 2 years, especially if you've seen his work in Impact. And Lee Moriarty just never misses. He always has great chemistry. Wrestlers that he's in. And of course, Sydal and Christian having great chemistry as a team as well. And all 4 of them did really well for a really fun match. Okay. Next, we get a backstage segment where our interviewer ends up interviewing them and Maria, and the Kingdom is in distraught and they're upset that they lost the infantry. And then we ended this backstage interview segment, Maria calling out Trish and saying that I gave you your first shot at the women's division. This will be your last opportunity to get before calling Mike and Matt to head on off of the interview set. Again, if we continue to build this story between the Kingdom and Trish, I think this is going to be a really fun one. Match number 9, we have the Dark Order. Taking the Dark Order, which in this case is made up of John Silver and Alex Reynolds, taking on Dave V. Bang and August Matthews. Honestly, this was a squash match to show how well of a tag that the Dark Order is. We see that Silver attacks Bang on the apron and then throws him into the guardrail on the outside. There's a running Insiguri into elbow into another Insiguri into a stunner and German suplex with a jackknife cover for the win. Typical Dark Order stuff. They work well as a tag team. Dark Order is the winner here. It was a quick match just to prove that Dark Order is a credible tag team. But the match itself wasn't the important bit. What we got afterwards is what is important to cover here. So after this match is over on the Titantron, the Righteous and Stu Grayson appear on the Titantron, call out the Dark Order for next week, asking for aggression. The Dark Order accepts, and Reynolds pile drives Matthews, and Silver hits a UFO, sending a message. So last week, me and JBL talked about how the Righteous and Stu's team seems like it's 3 different ideas be blended together, 3 different styles of promos being blended together, and it still feels that same way for that week. So I'm not quite buying Stu and the Righteous as a faction and a cohesive unit. But I do appreciate that we're continuing the storyline between them and the Dark Order. Now the question is, next week, are we going to get a 6-man tag or is it going to be a standard tag team? Very interested to see what happens, so we're going to have to come back next week to see what kind of match we get. Next, we get a backstage segment where Diamante is being interviewed, and then Mark Sterling comes out and tells Diamante that he is willing to split the profits of this match 51-49 if Diamante lays down and takes the pin from Layla Gray. Diamante tells Mark he can go shove it, which then proceeds into her entrance, setting up match number 10, which is Layla Gray versus Diamante. Honestly, I think this match was a lot of fun. Now, there was a point where Diamante did lay it down a little bit, and she was pretending that she was to take the pin, and then she ends up kicking Layla as Layla gets close to take the pin. Ultimately, this was a back and forth, but in the finishing sequence, Mark Sterling gets involved, distracts Diamante for Layla to pick up the win here. I'm going to roll in the next segment into this since it's a storyline. Backstage, Layla's being interviewed with her and Mark. Diamante comes up and she basically calls out Mark and Layla for cheaters, that without Mark that he could have beaten Layla. And so Diamante challenges Layla to a rematch. And before Mark can say anything and intervene, Layla accepts, which makes Mark Sterling worry a little bit. So we're getting layers of doubt that Mark does Layla's ability, and we are going to get a rematch. And this is a women's story that is going to continue. Now it's built upon the most basic foundation of the women's storyline, but ultimately we're getting spewed and we're slowly developing cohesion within Ring of Honor, which I appreciate. Next match, we have Darius Martin, AR Fox, and Action Andretti taking on Shane Taylor, Workhorseman. We've seen this match before, but I always enjoy it because Action, Darius, and AR are just really fast in the ring. You have the powerhouses in Shane Taylor and the Workhorseman. Ultimately, this was a lot of fun. In the closing sequence, that Martin sends Taylor and Drake into each other and onto the floor. Andretti hits a plancha over the top, but gets caught. So Martin's suicide dives through them all. Fox and Henry trade strikes inside the ring, and Fox gets a roll up out of nowhere for the win. This match was pretty short, but it never let up. It was all action oriented, and all 6 men were amazing in this ring. Your semi main event for tonight's Ring of Honor was a Pure Rules match between Daniel Garcia and Rocky Romero. Honestly, this match was so much fun. Since both of these guys have a similar style, this was really fun. Ultimately, in the finishing sequence, here we have that there's a springboard DT by Rocky and a Falcon Arrow into an armbar in the center of the ring. Daniel Garcia fights to the ropes, and even though there's no rope break, he uses the rope as leverage to roll through and reverse into a Dragon Tamer. Rocky fights the ropes to try to climb underneath, but there is no rope break, and Rocky taps out for your winner of this Pure Rules match being Daniel Garcia. As I mentioned, both of these guys are perfectly suited for the Pure Rules style. Garcia is really, truly turning into a young American dragon. Now, after the match, Daniel Garcia continues to attack Rocky Romero and tries to put him in the Dragon Tamer again. But who should come out but Orange Cassidy to make the save? What I loved about this moment is the Ring of Honor fans got to see Orange Cassidy, I would say is over in AEW, but more importantly, the way that we're chronologically built, this makes total sense because at Forbidden Door this Sunday, Daniel Garcia and Orange Cassidy are involved in International Championship Fatal 4-Way alongside Zack Sabre Jr. and Katsuyori Shibata. And this makes sense that we have them still trying to figure it out. We mentioned this yesterday. Me and John mentioned this mess yesterday during our AA Dynamite. But I made the realization that if Daniel Garcia does not, no, Daniel Garcia is PWG champion. So at the end of that Fatal 4-Way, one of those 4 men is going to walk out of Forbidden Door as double champion. That's except for Orange Cassidy. Orange retains, then he still has the champion, but Katsuyori Shibata, Zack Sabre Jr., and Daniel Garcia, one of those 3 men could potentially walk out of Forbidden Door as a double champion, which is insane to me. Then, of course, we have our main event for this week's Ring of Honor, which is a Chicago street fight for the Ring of Honor Women's Championship with challenger Kiera Hogan taking on champion Athena. I thought this was a really solid match, and I was so proud of both of these women. So I just want to spend a lot of time going the play-by-play of this match. Athena with some groundwork, ground and pound earlier before looking for a ladder, where then Hogan hits a baseball slide onto the ladder, sending Athena crashing to the floor. Both women at this point begin to brawl on the outside, where Kiera grabs a trash can lid, Athena grabs a kendo stick, and we then next see Athena sending Hogan in the trash can, and then she beats on him with a kendo stick, which, if you haven't seen this match, please do, because it's a beautiful visual to see that. Then Kiera throws the trash can into Athena and comes back with a running hip attack in the corner. Then we proceed with a drop kick to the trash can in the face of Athena, a fisherman's neck breaker on the trash can by Hogan, which gets a 2 count. Hogan sets up a ladder on the outside as a bridge and puts Athena on it. Hogan comes off the top of the splash, but Athena moves and Hogan crashes ribs first onto the ladder. Athena sends Hogan into the guardrail a bunch and then unfolds about 6 chairs facing each other. Athena stacks the level of chairs on top of that, and then Athena takes too long and Hogan sends Athena crashing through another table on the outside. Hogan grabs the kendo stick and continues to attack. Athena finds one of her own, and then we proceed to trading shots back and forth. Kiera sets up, I should say, Athena on the table and comes off the apron with a splash, but the table doesn't break, so she now goes for the second rope and comes off with a splash, and this time it does. Athena uses the ladder as a weapon to set up a table inside the ring. Athena heads up the top rope, but Hogan catches her. Hogan tries to bring Athena off with head scissors, but Athena holds on and powerbombs Hogan through the table for a 2 count. This was easy. Athena sets up a trash can in the corner and then goes underneath the ring and grabs a mysterious bag, which we come to find out later is thumbtacks. Athena looks for a powerbomb onto the thumbtacks, but eats a super kick and returns the favor. Athena charges Hogan, but Hogan moves and Athena hits the trash can. There is a teardrop suplex by Kiera into the tacks for a 2 count. Kiera then chokes Athena with her braids and picks Athena up off the floor from the turnbuckle. Athena then rakes the eyes, which allows her to step on the apron and superplex Kiera off the top of a dozen of chairs on the floor. I audibly screamed at this point. Then we see Athena carrying an almost unconscious Kiera back into the ring and covers her for the 3 count, with your winner and still Ring of Honor Women's World Champion being Athena. This match was phenomenal. Both Kiera and Athena pulled out all the stops here. While parts of it were just the brutalness that a street fight can show, this is what a gimmick street fight is supposed to be like. And what made this match even better, outside of the spots and the craziness that this was, that leading into this championship match, there was a story between the two of them and a feud that made sense. And this continues to show that Athena is carrying the entire Ring of Honor women's division, as nobody has been able to dethrone her right now. This was excellent. And we end this week's Ring of Honor with Athena in the backstage interview, basically putting the Ring of Honor women's locker on notice, saying that I have defended this title. Nobody has yet to dethrone me. So this is a notice for the Ring of Honor women's locker. Y'all need to step up or be prepared to be stepped on. And then she walks off to end this week's Ring of Honor. So that brings us to the end of this week's Ring of Honor review. My final thoughts for this week's Ring of Honor is that this was a long episode. It was like almost 2.5 hours, girl. And it was crazy. But this entire episode was very consistent. Honestly, the main event delivered. And throughout this week's Ring of Honor, the youth movement that continues with Kyle Fletcher and Trish Adora getting big wins, and that the Dark Order and the Righteous storyline, while I might have issues with promos, is intriguing a little bit, and that we're slowly building to Death Before Dishonor has officially started. So for me personally, I think tonight is building towards Death Before Dishonor on Friday, July 21st. And I'm really excited with that. I give this week's episode, if I'm rating out of 5, I'm going to give this a solid 3. I'm going to give this a solid 3 out of 5 for me. I thought, like I said, this was a long episode, but it was consistent with all the matches, or storylines. We see younger talent showing their mettle and getting big wins on tonight's episode. And my God, that main event probably going to end up being on my favorite match list of this month. But that is going to conclude the long form version of Ring of Honor, or the Beat the Clock Ring of Honor review. If you would like to see the short form version of this review, to go check out the Twitter. No, make sure to check out TikTok and Instagram, where you can see the short form version, the Beat the Clock version, in which I attempt to review this long episode of Ring of Honor in under 5 minutes. If you want to hear more in-depth reviews of the weekly TV shows that are going on, check out our other reviews where we are reviewing pretty much all the WE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, and Ring of Honor to get our more in-depth reviews. Make sure to also check out our other series, Hot Tag, where our host Adolfo breaks down the week's wrestling news in a bite-sized 2 to 3 minute video so you can stay up to date on all the wrestling news in a short time frame. That is going to be it for me. Next week, it will be back to JBL and myself hosting Ring of Honor review. So until then, we'll see you next time. But for now, adios and sayonara.